Hello, fellow history lovers and English learners. Welcome back to our cozy storytelling corner. Today, we are going to embark on a journey through time to explore the life of a man who changed the map of the world and the hearts of millions. Before we begin, let us sit back, take a deep breath, and think about a few questions. What does it mean to be truly great? Is greatness measured by the land a person conquers, or by the ideas they leave behind for others to find? Can one person, born on a small, quiet island, really move the foundations of the entire world? Many years ago, a boy was born who would answer all these questions with his life. He was a soldier, a dreamer, and eventually an emperor. His name was Napoleon Bonaparte. His story is not just a list of wars and dates. It is a story of a human soul that climbed to the highest mountains of success and then fell into the deepest valleys of silence. Let us listen closely to the echoes of his footsteps as they walk through history. Chapter 1. The Boy of the Wild Island. In the year 1769, on the small, rugged island of Corsica, a child was born into a world of wind and stone. This island was far from the golden lights of Paris, and the people who lived there were tough and independent. Little Napoleon was not born into wealth or royalty. He was the son of a noble family that did not have much money but had a lot of pride. As a young boy, Napoleon was often quiet and kept to himself. He spent many hours walking along the blue waters of the Mediterranean Sea, looking at the horizon and wondering what lay beyond the waves. He loved stories of ancient heroes like Alexander the Great and Julius Caesar. While other children played games in the streets, Napoleon was lost in his books, dreaming of big things. His mother, Letizia, was a strong and strict woman who taught him that hard work and courage were the only ways to survive. She was the one who gave him the spirit of a lion. When he was only 9 years old, Napoleon left his warm island to go to a military school in France. It was a cold and lonely time for him. He spoke French with a heavy Corsican accent, and the other boys laughed at him because he was not rich like they were. They saw him as an outsider, a little foreigner, who did not belong in their world of fancy clothes and noble names. But their laughter did not break him. It only made the fire inside him burn brighter. He studied harder than anyone else. He was especially good at mathematics and geography. He understood the shapes of the land and the logic of numbers. On snowy winter days, he would lead his classmates in snowball fights, organizing them like a real army. Even then, he was showing the world that he was a leader. He learned that knowledge was a weapon and that a sharp mind was more powerful than any sword. He felt like a stranger in France, but he was slowly learning how to conquer it. Napoleon's childhood was a mix of loneliness and ambition. He felt a deep love for his home island of Corsica, yet he knew that to become the man he wanted to be, he had to leave it behind. He often felt like he had two souls, one that wanted to rest in the quiet mountains of his home, and another that wanted to change the world. This struggle followed him throughout his early life. He was a young man who did not fit in anywhere, which made him realize that he had to create his own place in history. He began to see the world as a giant puzzle, and he believed he was the only one who could put the pieces together. The years he spent in military school were not just about learning how to fight. They were about learning how to think and how to endure. He learned to be patient, to watch his enemies, and to wait for the right moment to act. Chapter 2. The Fire of the Revolution. The year 1789 changed everything. The French Revolution exploded like a great storm, tearing down the old world of kings and queens. For many, it was a time of fear and blood, but for Napoleon, it was a golden door opening. He was a young officer in the army now, and he saw that in this new world, a person's name did not matter as much as their talent. He was in the right place at the right time. In 1793, during the siege of a city called Toulon, Napoleon showed everyone what he could do. The French army was struggling to take the city back from the British. Napoleon had a plan. He positioned the cannons with perfect precision, using his knowledge of mathematics to strike the enemy where it hurt the most. When the smoke cleared, the city was taken, and the name of Napoleon was on everyone's lips. He was promoted to general at the very young age of 24. This was the moment of his great awakening. He realized that he had a special gift for seeing the battlefield like a chessboard. He did not just see soldiers. He saw movements, time, and human emotions. After his success in Toulon, he was sent to Italy to lead a tired and hungry French army. The soldiers had no shoes, no food, and no hope. Napoleon stood before them and promised them glory. He did not talk to them like a cold commander. He talked to them like a brother. He marched with them, ate with them, and led them across the dangerous Alps. His victories in Italy were like a whirlwind. One after another, the old empires of Europe fell before his genius. He returned to Paris not just as a general, but as a hero. The people saw him as a man who could bring order to the chaos of the revolution. They saw him as a savior. But Napoleon's ambition was even larger than Europe. He looked toward the east, toward the deserts of Egypt. He wanted to follow in the footsteps of Alexander the Great. In 1798, he sailed across the sea with thousands of soldiers and hundreds of scientists. He wanted to win battles, but he also wanted to win knowledge. This was when his soldiers discovered the Rosetta Stone, which allowed us to understand ancient Egyptian writing. Napoleon was fascinated by the pyramids and the silence of the desert. Even though the war in Egypt was very difficult and eventually failed, the stories of his adventures made him even more famous in France. He was a man of the modern world who walked among the ghosts of the ancient world. When he returned to France in 1799, the government was weak and the people were tired. Napoleon realized that the moment he had been waiting for since he was a boy on Corsica had finally arrived. He took control of the government, and the world began to hold its breath. Chapter 3: The Crown and the Glory. On a cold December day in 1804, the great church of Notre Dame in Paris was filled with the smell of incense and the sound of gold. Napoleon was about to be crowned Emperor of the French. In a famous moment, instead of letting the Pope place the crown on his head, Napoleon took the crown with his own hands and placed it there himself. He wanted to show the world that no one gave him his power. He had earned it with his own mind and his own sword. He was now at the peak of his life. He was not just a king. He was a symbol of what a person could achieve through sheer will. He married a woman named Josephine, whom he loved deeply, though their relationship was often full of drama and sadness. Together, they sat on the most powerful throne in Europe. But being an emperor was not just about wearing a crown. Napoleon worked 18 hours a day. He changed the laws, he built roads, and he created schools. He wanted to make France the center of the world. The following years were a time of legendary battles. In 1805, at the Battle of Austerlitz, Napoleon won his greatest victory. He was outnumbered, but he used the fog and the land to trick his enemies. It was like a beautiful and terrible dance of war. For a few years, it seemed like Napoleon could not lose. He controlled almost all of Europe, from the sunny beaches of Spain to the cold borders of Poland. He put his brothers and sisters on the thrones of other countries, trying to create a family of kings. He was the master of the continent. But with great power came a great change in his heart. He began to believe that he was more than a man. He stopped listening to the advice of others. He became lonely at the top of his mountain of success. He wanted more and more, and his hunger for glory began to blind him to the dangers around him. The shadow began to grow in 1812. Napoleon decided to invade Russia with an army of over 600,000 men. It was the largest army the world had ever seen. He wanted to punish the Russian Tsar for not following his rules. But Russia was a land of endless space and biting cold. As Napoleon marched deeper into the country, the Russians retreated and burned everything behind them. There was no food for the soldiers and no grass for the horses. When Napoleon finally reached Moscow, the city was on fire. He waited for a letter of surrender that never came. Then, the winter arrived. The Great Retreat from Russia was one of the saddest stories in history. Thousands of soldiers died in the snow from hunger and cold. The Grand Army was destroyed, not by an enemy general, but by the wind and the ice. Napoleon returned to France with only a tiny part of his army left. The magic was gone. His enemies saw that he could be beaten, and they all rose up against him at once. Chapter 4. The Lonely Rock in the Ocean. The end of the empire came quickly. After a series of lost battles, Napoleon was forced to give up his throne in 1814. His enemies sent him to a small island called Elba, near the coast of Italy. It was a tiny kingdom for a man who had ruled almost all of Europe. But Napoleon was not finished. In a move that shocked the world, he escaped from Elba and landed in France with only a few hundred men. As he marched toward Paris, the soldiers who were sent to arrest him instead joined him. They remembered the general who had led them to glory, and they cried, "Long live the emperor!" For 100 days, Napoleon was the ruler of France again. But the other countries of Europe would not allow it. They met him one last time on a rainy field in Belgium, at a place called Waterloo, in June of 1815. It was a long and bloody day. In the end, Napoleon was defeated. The dream was finally over. This time, his enemies took no chances. They sent him to the most isolated place they could find, the island of St. Helena. This island was a lonely rock in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, thousands of miles away from France and his family. For the last 6 years of his life, the man who had moved armies and changed laws spent his days walking in a small garden and looking out at the endless sea. He was surrounded by British guards and lived in a damp, windy house called Longwood. He spent his time talking to his few remaining friends and writing his memoirs. He wanted to make sure that history remembered him the way he wanted to be remembered. He often felt a deep sadness, thinking about his son whom he was not allowed to see, and Josephine, who had died while he was in his first exile. The silence of the island was a heavy weight on a man who was used to the noise of trumpets and cannons. On May 5, 1821, Napoleon Bonaparte breathed his last breath. He was only 51 years old. It is said that his last words were, "France, the army, the head of the army, Josephine." He died in a simple room, far from the golden palace of Notre Dame. For a long time, the world was quiet. The great storm had passed. He was buried on the island under a simple stone with no name on it. But even in death, Napoleon could not be kept on a lonely rock. Many years later, his body was brought back to Paris and placed in a magnificent tomb under a golden dome. People from all over the world still visit him there. They come to see the final resting place of the boy from Corsica who became an emperor. They come to wonder about the man who reached for the stars and ended his life counting the waves on a distant shore. Chapter 5. The Shadow That Never Fades. Today, many years after his death, Napoleon Bonaparte is still one of the most famous people in history. But why do we still talk about him? Is it only because of the wars he fought? No, it is because of the things he built that still exist today. The Napoleonic Code, which was his system of laws, is still the foundation of the legal systems in many countries around the world. He believed that laws should be clear and that they should apply to everyone equally. He changed the way schools work, the way cities are organized, and even the way we drive on the road. He left a mark on the world that time cannot wash away. In many ways, the modern Europe we see today began with his vision, even if that vision was born through conflict and pain. He was a man of many contradictions, a lover of liberty who became a dictator, a man of peace who lived for war, and a genius who made huge mistakes. Historians still argue about whether Napoleon was a hero or a villain. To some, he was a great leader who brought light and progress to a dark world. To others, he was a man whose pride cost the lives of millions of people. Perhaps the truth is that he was both. He was a human being with great strengths and great weaknesses. He showed us that one person can change the course of history through passion and intelligence. He also showed us that no matter how high we climb, we are still subject to the laws of nature and time. His life is a lesson in the power of the human spirit, but also a warning about the dangers of having too much power. He once said, "History is a set of lies that people have agreed upon." Maybe he said this because he knew that his own story would be told in 1,000 different ways by 1,000 different people. As we look back at the rise and fall of this emperor, we are reminded that our lives are like stories written in the sand. Some stories are short and quiet, while others are long and loud like a great symphony. Napoleon's story is a symphony that never truly ends. It teaches us about ambition, about the love of one's country, and about the deep loneliness of being different. Whether we admire him or not, we cannot ignore him. His ghost walks through the streets of Paris, through the fields of Europe, and through the pages of every history book. He reminds us that even from a small island, a person can reach out and touch the whole world. And so, the story of the little corporal, the man of destiny, remains with us, inviting us to think about our own dreams and the legacy we will leave behind when our own journey is over. Now that we have reached the end of this long and winding journey through the life of Napoleon Bonaparte, I hope you feel a little closer to the history of our world. Language is not just about words and grammar. It is about the stories that connect us all as human beings. By learning these stories in English, you are not just practicing your listening or your reading. You are opening your heart to the experiences of those who came before us. History is a mirror that shows us who we are and who we can become. As you think about the life of the boy from Corsica who dared to dream of an empire, ask yourself, what is the fire that burns inside you? What is the goal that you are working toward every day? We all have a little bit of ambition within us, just like Napoleon did. I would love to hear your thoughts on this story. Do you think Napoleon was a great leader, or was he just a man who wanted too much power? If you could ask him one question, what would it be? And more importantly, what does greatness mean to you in your own life today? Please share your reflections in the comments below. Let us turn this space into a beautiful garden of ideas where we can all learn from each other. Don't forget to keep practicing, keep dreaming, and keep listening to the stories that the world has to tell. Your journey in English is just like a historical adventure, and every new word you learn is a small victory on your own map of life. Thank you for joining me today in our Storytelling Corner. Until next time, take care, keep curious, and keep the fire of learning alive in your heart. Together, we will continue to discover the magic of words and the power of the past. Goodbye for now, and see you in the next story.